probably did. I mean, how else do you start a podcast?
Yeah, literally. How else? How you doing, babe?
Every episode I said we're on.
Oh,
or
good.
It's going, or something
well,
to that effect.
we would like to be on every episode, so.
Very true.
How are you feeling? Are you feeling light as a feather today?
Ooh, my neck is out.
My neck, my back.
My hair just got
Whacked.
Whacked. Okay, that's better.
Yeah.
Guys, I got a
Jay just
haircut.
got the most gorgeous haircut.
Ooh-wee.
Ooh, baby.
Shout out at Isaiah Blends at Ramirez Barber Lounge, South Salt Lake City. You already know what it is.
You already know what it is. It looks phenomenal. Jay had this idea maybe a week and a half ago. He was like, I think I'm done with my dreads.
It's time to cut them.
And then he just did it. And I think that's one thing I admire about you is I feel as though you're a pretty great decision maker. Like when the thought comes to your head and you feel good about it, it's not like you sit on the fence for a long time. You're like, all right, we're going forward.
Because it's like in my mind, if I'm there already, it means I've already seen it and I already have the plan and I already know where this is going. And by the time I tell anybody, I'm not really asking them like, hey, is this a good idea? It's just like, no, I'm just telling you what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I like it because I am indecisive sometimes, a lot of the times.
We complement each other in that way.
Exactly. So like you don't come to me and then like, stress me out with like, I can't decide because I would be like, I can't decide either.
I don't know. Well, nothing is going to get done.
Nothing's ever going to happen. Anyway, it looks great.
Thank you.
Will be releasing photos tomorrow?
No, definitely not.
Oh, sorry, your photo shoots tomorrow.
Yeah, photo shoots tomorrow, and then I think like the first look, so I've got a live stream Thursday evening.
Ooh, that'll be the first look?
That'll be like the first time people see it, but then like the first official photos will be like next week or something like that. I have a photo shoot tomorrow.
The photo shoot is not only because he got a haircut, by the way.
Right. No, it's for the album.
It's for the brand. The brand is strong.
Did I just announce the album? Well, I mean, whatever. Yeah, for the album.
For all 100 of you listening, don't tell.
Don't tell anyone. No,
just
kidding.
I think it's like in everyone's nature to assume a recording artist is coming out with an album.
That's a good point. Look for my album.
Anyway, well, it looks phenom. I can't wait for the people to see it.
Feels great. Feels great to have a neck again.
How does it feel with headphones on?
Weird that I didn't have to push anything back. I just put them on my head.
It seriously looks so good.
I forgot what this was like.
Yeah.
Like just
it's been 5 years.
Hair to get out of the way.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I like it. All right. Well, this week's episode is a little bit of a different format. Mm-hmm. We have our first guest.
Our first guest.
Yeah, we're so excited. Actually, it was not a plan to have a guest this soon. It kind of occurred naturally. So last week we put out our questions for Internet's mom and dad, and we got this question from one of our listeners. I just found out I'm pregnant. I'm 19 and broke up with a baby daddy before finding out. How do I know if keeping it or giving it up for adoption is best?
Oh, such a hard question.
I could not imagine. Like, that is such a tough situation. First of all, I'm honored that you would ask us that serious of a question and have faith that we could, like, give you some sound advice.
Yeah, we didn't want to treat it lightly.
Not at all.
Hence our guest.
Thank you so much for writing in. And one of our best friends is actually a birth mom. Mm-hmm. So we met Jayci
7 years ago.
You met her 7 years ago, and I met her, like, the next year. She is married to your best friend, Matt. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And prior to them meeting, she was a birth mom. Let's see. She said it was 9 years ago she gave birth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she's had a lot of time with this decision, and she's not like fresh out of the gate or anything like that. She's gone to a lot of therapy. I think she's in a really good place with it all.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys will get to hear her talk about it and kind of see her perspective and where she is with everything, but I'm really excited.
Yeah, for sure. it was so special for her to share this experience with us. And if you guys have any follow-up questions, she did mention in the interview, she's an open book. Like, you guys can reach out to her directly. We will put her email in the description of the podcast, as well as her Instagram handle. And she's just said you can reach out to her on any platform in any way.
If you're a birth mom or an adoptive family, or, someone who is adopted, just reach out. She's
a really good resource. So we're so grateful for that. If you have any questions that we didn't get to, like I said, feel free to reach out, or you can even submit questions to us. If there's enough questions, we are down to do like a part 2. I think it was such a fresh topic for us. It's like, we don't even know what are the best questions to ask. So I think we did a pretty good job, but if you're more curious, or like there's more things that, you want to know, there's enough people, we're down. So I hope you enjoy. I do want to put a slight trigger warning towards the end of the interview. It's like a pretty emotional process. So, I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the audio may be a little bit different because we were not recording like on our mics. So bear with us on that, but hope you guys enjoy it.
In last week's Dear Mom and Dad, we got a very interesting question, and we wanted to devote a whole episode to the question because we felt it was very important. So we had someone write in, I just found out I'm pregnant. I'm 19 and broke up with a baby daddy before finding out. How do I know if keeping it or giving it up for adoption is best? So pretty heavy question.
What a question. Okay. We have never had any experience with adoption. So we figured, let's talk to one of our friends who has had some experience. So we have our friend Jayci here with us, who is a birth mom and has gone through the adoption process, who can give us a little bit more insight, advice, just share a little bit of your experience with us. So I think that like the first thing in this question is, what's the first part of the question?
It's all the same question. Yeah.
Did I say hi? Hello.
Yeah, this is
say hi.
Hi, I'm here. This is my first podcast.
Really?
This is my podcast virginity.
Oh my gosh, welcome. Well, she is a birth mom and a mom of 2, so I think she's going to have a lot of good insight for us and a lot of good perspective. The question is like the whole thing, like how do I know if keeping it or giving it up for adoption is best?
Okay.
So really quickly, how many years has it been since you gave birth?
So my birth son will be 9 this October, and like this time 10 years ago was when I was pregnant, making my big decision. So to kind of like preface my personal situation real quick is I was also 19 and I was not...
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I was not in a committed relationship. Or if I'm being really honest, I wasn't in really any relationship with my birth son's birth dad, so his biological father. And so I was kind of in a similar situation. It was like me and this baby, and I'm not like 14 and pregnant and I like need my mom's permission, and I'm not like 30 and like have this great career and also could like do it without a dad. I was 19. It was like this kind of awkward age where I could have or I couldn't have.
It's like you're an adult but with no life experience.
Right. Yeah. It's like 18 is legally an adult, but I don't know. At least for me at that age, I was not mature enough to be making some of these heavy hitting decisions. But so I was 19, found out I was pregnant in February of 2011. And then gave birth October 2011 and placed my baby 3 days later at the hospital.
So how far into your pregnancy did you make that decision that you were going to be placing?
So whenever I answer like a really broad adoption question, the first thing, I always preface it with 2 things. The first thing I always say is when I'm talking to a birth mom or like a potential birth mom and her potential like parents, is number 1, this is your baby. You are this child's mother. Like, this is your baby no matter what right now. That might change in the future, right? We might place this baby But like regardless of that decision, or if you make that decision, like right now, right here, this is your baby. And I think it's really important for anybody having that conversation to make sure that they acknowledge that.
I've never thought about it like that.
It's really invalidating when you look at a birth mom and you're like, okay, so like, what are you going to do with this baby? And it's like, no, what are we going to do with your baby? Like, this is your baby. You have to acknowledge that no matter what age they are.
Wow.
And then number two, that's really important, especially when I share like my personal experience, is yes, I have like a much like closer look and like stronger opinion on adoption because I've experienced it. But every single adoption is so different. Just like it's like if you have a kid, it's like you can relate to other parents, but like every kid is just so different. So when I talk about my personal experience, I like to make sure that people understand like this is my experience. This is based off what I've went through, or maybe like I have a few birth moms or adoptive parents that I'm really close to. So this is like strongly like influenced by that experience. So it's not like with adoption, there's no rights or wrongs.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
technically. You try to
there's
do what's
some
right for the baby.
Right, but like at the end of the day, like what might be right for me might not be right for someone else who might be in my exact same situation with, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think those two things, before I answer like any questions, I just like to make sure people know like this is that mom's baby. It's important to acknowledge that, and then, you know, everyone's experience is going to be different. So my personal opinion on adoption is that it's the most wonderful thing in the world. I've learned through talking to other birth moms and talking to other adoptive parents is that it's not usually a smooth sailing experience. It's just, you know, there's a big learning curve and there's usually speed bumps, and that's very normal. But my personal experience, I think, is like as good as it gets. So I also think that's something important to say is I'm like, I love adoption. I love being a birth mom. Like, I've got this great relationship. And if I give that to a potential birth mom and she goes in with that expectation, most likely, right, statistically and most likely, it's not going to be as easy or as great. If it is, that's great. I hope it is, but chances are it's not going to be. So
you had, I mean, this is jumping the gun, but you have an open adoption, correct?
Yeah, so when you're first making a decision about adoption, I think you have to decide what's right for you. So that's adoptive perspective if you're the parents wanting to adopt, and if you're the birth mom. You have to think, what am I okay with? What am I not okay with? It's 2020. Most birth moms now know that they can have an open adoption, so they're going to take that option.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I mean, years and years and years ago, if you have friends, like if you're in our age, so I'm going to be 29 here, anyone around like our age, if they were adopted, usually doesn't have a super open adoption because it wasn't...
I didn't realize that was like a newer thing.
Yeah, it wasn't really a thing. It was kind of like a taboo, awkward topic for people to like acknowledge or talk about, and now it's like we talk about everything and social media and whatever, but it would be kind of hard to hide the fact that like you had a baby and placed it, and then like, so like my son, he's half black and he's with a white family, so they are gonna have to tell him something regardless, right?
Very clear.
But you know, if I were to have placed a white baby with blonde hair and blue eyes to blonde parents with blue eyes, like, and they decided not to, one, that's that's their decision and they could. But for me, I knew right away if I was gonna ever be okay with adoption, I had to have an open adoption because I wanted that baby. It wasn't, that's another thing that I think is a huge misconception when you, like when I tell my friends like, oh, I'm thinking about adoption. At the time it was like, you don't want your baby? And in my head it was like, what? No, I'm doing this to give this baby like the best possible outcome, the best option. I want to give this child everything I can't give him, or
parents, household,
whatever your reasons are, it's the most selfless thing you can do. Are there birth moms that, you know, sure, there might be one or two that are a little crazy and like didn't want their baby. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would argue that 99% of birth moms that get pregnant and have a baby want to raise that baby. It's not a want, it's a one step further, what's going to be best for this baby. So that's your first, like, is this for me or is this not for me? You have to decide, okay, is adoption an option? And then once you've decided, potentially, so I really want this baby and I think I'm going to keep this baby, but let's start looking at adoption. Your first, step after that would be open or closed. How do I picture this potential relationship with the family that this baby, that would be like your first step.
With open adoptions, and after this, I want to get back to your timeline, but in open adoptions, can you decide how often like visitation is, or is it like court mandated, or is it just between the families?
So
or how does that work?
It's all verbal. So while I have the baby in my stomach, the state, all 50 states recognize that is my baby.
Okay.
So even if I'm looking at you and I'm like, yes, you are going to adopt this baby, we've started the process, we've got lawyers on both sides, whatever, right? Like, I'm so sure that I'm giving you this baby. There's so many times where like the baby comes out and they're like, nope, never mind. And there's no legal standing. Doesn't matter if you've paid for things already or whatever. It does not matter. So I get to have as many conversations with you as I want. And a lot of times I see these families are so desperate for a baby. Desperate kind of sounds like negative, but they want a child so bad for whatever the circumstance, and they're willing to kind of say like, whatever you want, like just let me raise your baby, right? Which makes sense. I would be willing to do just about anything if it meant I got to raise, a baby that I couldn't have myself. But so a lot of times I see that they've got this really great verbal agreement, right? And it's all positive, everything's good, everyone feels good about where they're at. And then a few months goes by and emotions get in the way, or we're learning new things that we maybe didn't know about each other on both sides, and it starts to change. So legally, once I hand you my baby, depending on the state, sometimes it's 6 months. Utah, it's like right away, like you sign the papers, a judge acknowledges it. California, where I placed, was 6 months. So it was their baby on paper, but had I changed my mind and
within 6 months.
Within 6 months, if I wanted to fight and pay hard enough, like I most likely could have taken him back, right? But I handed him over, signed papers within the week, and that was, the state recognized they were the legal guardian, that was their baby. So you talk about everything, right? The second you sign those papers and the second a judge says, you are now a birth mom and you are now mom and dad, everything goes out the window. There is nothing that legally binds that verbal or written contract. I could have a written, notarized contract with lawyers, with everything that says I get to see that baby every 4th of May for his entire life until he's 18. And everyone could be like, yep, we agree, sign, notarized. Lawyers are like, yep.
But once they're the legal guardians.
It doesn't mean anything the second they're the legal guardians if they're like, nah. Even if I go to court and hand these documents that say, like, you said, it does not matter, because
interesting.
The courts have to acknowledge, like, circumstances change. You signed away your rights. You're now the parents, and he has to look at the parents and say, like, is there a reason you don't want to, like, withhold this agreement? And if they say yep, they don't even have to explain it. They don't even have to show up to court for that. Like, so that goes the whole legality side of it.
So it is just very like
which
between
can,
the two parties.
Be wonderful, but again, I have best case scenario. So I went in and met my potential family that was going to adopt this baby. I fell in love with their 2 children first. I fell in love with them. They had 2 adopted kids already with open adoptions.
So they had kind of gone through the process already.
Yeah, they had gone through the process twice. They thought they were done. They're like, we feel very blessed. We have a boy, we have a girl. Like, our family's complete. And then I came in and she let me ask her any question I want, like whatever. And it wasn't like she wanted my baby or she was a potential family. It was like, hey, I've done this, so if you're thinking about this, I can be a resource for you. And she was wonderful. And then
she was just a resource.
She was just a resource.
Oh my gosh.
She went to church with my parents down in California, and so when I would like go home, I eventually moved home when I was pregnant, but I would ask her questions and we went on like a couple like little like mini vacations with them and would like spend time with them. And so it really, I just fell in love with them, like, as people. It didn't feel like they were putting on, like, a front or a facade because they really wanted my baby.
Right,
she wasn't
because they weren't even trying.
Yeah, she wasn't making me promises. She was saying, like, I made these promises to my birth moms, and this is how it's played out. And vice versa. Like, I love the fact that, I think her kids were, like, 3 and 5 at the time, and I love the fact that, like, they knew the words birth mom. They knew the words, like, adoption, and they knew... And, like, you know, how much can a 5-year-old really know? But,
they're familiar.
Yeah. The kids knew, like, oh, what's your birth mom's name? Or, like, who's your birth mom? And, like, they knew. And I loved that because I'm like, if this is something I'm going to do, like, I want this kid. I want this baby to know. I want to be around still. And I want him, if he ever has questions, like, why did you do this? I want to be able to answer them. I don't ever want to have a scenario where my kid's like, why didn't my mom want me? Or like, why did my mom place me? Or whatever, you know, if those questions were to ever arise. So my situation was I fell in love with them first. And then we had a couple different experiences. And it was, for me, I made the decision that I was 100% committed to adoption once I found the family. So some girls make the decision, adoption first, and then they go and look for the perfect family, like the perfect fit for them. But for me, it was, I wanted to raise him so bad, and I was convinced that I was going to, but I just had a couple like undeniable experiences where I was like, oh, like this family is so wonderful, and it just kind of like stars aligned and it happened. But I didn't make the call until I think it was like 3 weeks before he was born.
Oh my gosh.
So we...
Really?
Had you like bought anything for him yet?
No. So I did have him early. So I think I had like 2 months left. And when I was... I was about 7 months pregnant, and I remember thinking, I think it was my dad that was like, you know, what if, you know, you love them and like they're not really like asking, you know, for a baby, but like what if this is the family? Like, we love them so much, and he really would be a perfect fit there, you know. And I was like, yeah, like if I were gonna do adoption, like that to me would be wonderful. And so it was like, well, let's think about it, let's pray about it, let's think about it. Coming from a super religious background, like that prayer was really important to us, and they're of the same religion. And so my dad called him and said, you know, we're gonna pray about this, is this something, you know, you guys are open to? And they immediately went like, it's like exciting, but then they're like, well, is it? Like, do we want another baby? This is a huge decision. Yeah. Like, we thought we were done. They were totally good and happy. And little did they know, you know, this little baby was, now we know, was supposed to be with them all along. But they were like, okay, cool, let's pray. And we all spent the next like week or two praying. And I just felt an overwhelming, like love and peace with them. I knew that if I kept and raised him, that it was going to be okay. But I also knew, like, if I placed him with them, like, he was going to be like set, he was going to be good, he was going to have siblings, he was going to have a dad. For me, the biggest thing was, I can be the world's greatest mom, but I can't be the world's greatest mom and the world's greatest dad at the same time. Yeah. So even if I gave him, I could win the $1 billion lottery tomorrow, and the one thing I couldn't buy him was like this really awesome father. And because I didn't have a great relationship with his biological father, I wasn't willing to gamble that, like, hey, maybe he'd step up. Maybe if I keep this baby, like, he'll be a wonderful father.
Sure.
And now, years later, like, he has kids and he's married, and from what I know or have seen on, like, social media and from people, like, he's a great dad. So, like, again, it totally could have worked out and would have been great, but it was a gamble, and I wasn't willing to take that gamble for me at that time. So,
and for the baby's future.
Right, that was the biggest thing, is I wasn't willing to risk him not having everything that he could have. And again, when you answer that question, you have to be careful, because that can easily translate to, like, okay, so you're saying that, like, single moms who keep their babies, like, don't love their baby enough to, like, give them a dad. No, that's not what it means. It just means that where I was at, I took all factors. Where I was at financially, mentally, physically, whatever, age, plus him not having, like, a relationship with his dad. at the time, and knowing that probably wasn't going to be something that was going to be like possible or easy or whatever, I took all of those factors and made the decision that I now wanted to give him what I couldn't.
So with the birth father, you found out you were pregnant. How did the conversation go? Like, from the get-go, when he found out, was he like, that's cool, it can be your call, like, I'm out?
Yeah. He didn't say, like, I'm out. So, again, my birth son, like we talked about, is going to be 9 this year. So, I've had years to process this. If you would have asked me some of these same questions a few years ago, like, half of them I'd have been in tears, and the other half I'd have maybe sounded like a little bitter. Like, I've processed this a lot and just come to terms with, like, he did what he could. Like, he did the best he could with the information he had and, like, how he was raised. So my specific situation, like, he didn't have a dad. My birth son's biological father, he was also adopted, but by a single mom. And from what I know, they've got a great relationship, and she was a wonderful mother, but, like, he didn't have a dad. So
right.
Based off of what he had growing up and experience, and then based off this girl coming in being like, oop, I'm pregnant, like, he made the decision that he made, and I can't speak for him. I'm sure he has other factors and other things that, you know, for him, he might think of it as a closed adoption. I chose an open adoption, but that doesn't mean that he did.
Yeah.
Which was a really hard pill to swallow for a long time, but we'll save that for another podcast. But
wow, yeah, that's interesting.
The question that you asked me is, like, how did he respond?
Yeah.
We weren't in a committed relationship. We were friendly, obviously. It was, if I'm being blunt, we had 2 intimate encounters months apart, and just got really freaking unlucky. We were careful in a sense, I don't know how to say this without it being, like, too vulgar, but we were careful when the process was being finished. And then I also, like, how do you say that without...
I think that's as eloquent as it gets.
Not push, but pull, right?
Sure.
So that process was finished. And then I took plan B, like, 4-ish hours after. And, like, I was
Both times?
Yes, both times.
Wow, you are the 0.01%.
Right. So again, that'll be another, like, sex education conversation topic. That's like, you can get pregnant from, like, pre-cum,
and were you
right?
Or
like
pregnant from everything.
Yeah. What?
Were you taking birth control at the time?
I was, but thinking back, I was like, I don't want to say I was, like, taking it at the same time every day, and, like, I potentially, like, probably missed a pill or two, because I wasn't taking it to not get pregnant. I was taking it for, like, periods and skin and stuff.
Yeah.
So if I missed a pill, it wasn't that big of a deal. I was not sexually active when I got pregnant, in a sense that, like, I was active. Like, I had sex 2 times in, like, a 6-month period, and just...
That is wild.
Right. So this, like, I always joke that, like, this baby was coming whether I had that encounter or not. But when I told him, it was one of those, like, right? Kind of, like, took a deep breath.
Yeah.
And he immediately was like, what do you want to do? And I, like, no matter what feelings I have about the situation as a whole, I believed him. I trusted him that whatever decision I made, he was like, it's your call. I'm not gonna, you know, like, heavily influence you. At first, that was, like, the very first. I can remember we were, like, in my car. I picked him up. We were, like, in my car, and we were just talking about it. And he was just like, what do you want to do? And we played out all scenarios. I am pro-life for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never thought in a million years that, like, I would get an abortion, and I still feel that way. But you don't really know what
until it hits.
Right. You know, it's like that fight or flight. Like, you could always say, like, oh, if someone ever, like, punched me in the face, like, I'd punch them back. But it's like, until someone does, you're not really sure. So being in a situation where you're, like, pregnant at 19, growing up in this heavy religious environment, and then also with this guy that's, like, kind of a stranger, you're like, adoption, if we remove, like, the emotional aspect, you're like, it looks good on paper, right? It's like, we could just totally rid this situation, like, this problem, and then it not, you know, be an issue. But for me...
You mean abortion?
Yeah, sorry. No, did I say adoption?
Yeah.
Sorry. Abortion. Abortion was something that, like, at first glance, like, looked... like a good option. And for a lot of people, it is, right? For me, it was, he brought it up, and I just kind of took a second that was like, okay, yeah, I can acknowledge that would be a real easy out. No one would even know but me and you that I was pregnant. Like, we wouldn't think about it again. But for me, we took it off the table immediately is what I'm saying. So for a lot of girls, it's part of the discussion. I think it's important to know all of your options. I think it's important to make that decision with whatever you're comfortable with and talking to your doctors and your people and whatever. For me, I took it off immediately. Mm-hmm. And when I told him that, he was like, all right, cool, respected it. And then
what's our next options?
Yeah. I think for him being adopted, it was funny because then he was like, okay, so like we're gonna have a baby. Like, it wasn't even like, okay, well now abortion's off the table, now adoption. It was like abortion or we're having a baby. Yeah. Even though he was adopted himself, that was just like,
that's interesting.
That was where our conversation went. And then for me too, like I like knew a couple people that were adopted but not close enough or whatever, right? So for me it was like, oh crap, we're like having a baby, right? Yeah. And then it was like, well, our other option like is adoption. And growing up in the LDS or Mormon religion, at the time they had LDS Social Services, which was a huge adoption resource, free therapy, free counseling.
Is that not a thing anymore?
It's not a thing anymore.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
that's a bummer.
Yeah, it's not a thing anymore. But that was my next decision and my next resource was. My mom was the one that was like, all right, so we're placing this baby, like kind of off the jump. And I was like, well, hold on. And so from the very beginning, it was an option for me, but I always just thought like, no, I'm not, there's no way I could do that. Just like abortion. I'm like, there's no way I could do that. I thought of adoption kind of the same, like, well, to me, it was like a better option than abortion for my situation, but it still was just like, no, I'm not going to give my baby away. Like, I want my baby. Why would I give a baby away that I want? And then as I started to learn about it and read about it and start, like, counseling through LDS Social Services with a specific adoption therapist that, like, didn't have, a horse in the race, I started to learn more about it. And I was like, okay, I still don't want to do this, but it became more of, like a reality that like I could do this and it like people do this kind of a thing like people really, this is a real thing, this isn't like I saw it in a movie.
How long from the time that you found out you were pregnant until you started seriously considering adoption, and then from that point until you made the decision?
So my mom had me like on this website looking through families, she was very proactive about it, which, again, we've processed it. We've learned the pros and cons of those things. I don't recommend shoving adoption down a birth mom's throat, like, right out the gate. Mm-hmm. I recommend it being on the table, but then letting her process. But my mom was very pro-adoption. She was right? So she was looking at bigger picture, like her young daughter, whatever. But at the time, it was very like adoption, and I was like, ugh, no, right? Mm-hmm. But I started looking, and LDS Social.
So
right away. Yeah, well, I mean, within like a few weeks, I think she had like sent me the link to, and what it was is kind of like Facebook for adoption families. They pretty much put their cutest or best pictures that they feel like represent their family, and then they're writing, they get like 2 or 3 paragraphs and that's it. So I imagine these adoptive moms are like right, and then like delete,
there's a lot of edits.
I imagine, because I mean, think of it, you're wanting to get picked, so anyway, so you're going through these profiles and it's a little overwhelming, but you can go through and like filter, like kind of like online shopping for a family. That sounds like really kind of blunt, but I went on and it was like, are you willing to have like this or this? I wanted like same religious background. That was really important to me. So already out the gate, it cut a lot of people. On the specific site I was on, it didn't, but on other sites it did. So it was like, okay, I'm not gonna like obviously like have people that say like, hey, we're atheists, and that might be a great option for someone else, but like that already removed them off, my
your
options.
specific list.
Yeah. So you filter out. I thought I looked at like mixed race families, because I thought, wouldn't that be cool if I was able to find a family that I really loved that like had representation from both races and both cultures, so that he blended more. Like I looked at all my options. I ended up falling in love with this one family who I still like love and like have a lot of respect for. They were wanting to adopt, and I saw their pictures. They were so cute. I read their little bio. It like kind of made me laugh, and I made the mistake. I take full responsibility of like reaching out like way too soon. Totally jumped the gun and found them on Facebook and was like, I think for me, I was just trying to figure out like what would this be like. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, I can't speak for them, but I'm sure if you ask them like that, how could that not get you excited? You're waiting for a baby, and then all of a sudden, like not through your agency, like you get this Facebook message, and this girl's like
from a birth mom.
I literally was like, hey, I'm pregnant, and I saw your profile, and I'm like too impatient to like wait to like do it through the proper channels. Yeah. And of course they were like, oh my gosh, hi, right? Yeah. I immediately connected with them. I fell in love with them. They are wonderful people. But now we know he wasn't placed in that family. That's not where he ended up, going. And again, to just be respectful of all parties, I won't go into too much detail, but I changed my mind. I pretty much, not even pretty much, like I asked them, like, do you want this baby? And we went a few weeks. I think it might have been like almost 2 months.
Where kind of talking with each other.
Yeah, like this was the plan. And so again, during that process, they always knew I could change my mind, and I always knew I could change my mind.
I think that's important for, especially like the person that's asking this, is that like although you may verbally or like kind of make this plan with someone, don't ever feel bad about, you know what, I need to change my mind. Like always.
Don't base your decision off of that. Because like I felt, you know how terrible it feels to be like, oh, never mind, right? Because that's sure. Like gut-wrenching. When I still think about that, like, like it was the first time I was doing this, and if I ever had to do it again, like God forbid, that would not happen, right? And when I talk to potential birth moms, I always just like make sure they know, like, you don't have to make any promises. Like, you're gonna probably change your mind a million times. Your hormones are like off the charts. Right, and you're allowed
that's true
to
too. Yeah.
Like, and you might have like a really good week and be like, yes, I feel strong, I can do this, my mental health is great, and then the next week you're like, probably not, right? So the safest way to go about it is just to be like, hey, you guys are at the top of my list, I still am not sure, but like I would love to get to know you. It's part of the process. Adoptive parents know that going in. If they come in and they're like, we're getting this baby, blah, 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 blah. And I'm pretty sure statistically, like, if you're adopting a baby, you're going to have an experience where a birth mom or, like, a baby is, like, quote-unquote, taken away from you when you think you're going to get them. So if you go in, that would be, like, their fault. But I, like, way overpromised and then underdelivered, obviously. But, again, I am not making my decision based off anybody else.
Yeah,
so
and you can't.
As much as I love them, really to this day, as awful as I feel about it, I don't regret that decision because I had to do what was best for me and what was best for my baby at the time. And I wish I could do it differently. I can't. And at the end of the day, again, you cannot make decisions because like, oh, my mom's gonna be mad at me, or like, oh, I kind of made these people feel like this was their baby, or like, no, because in 5 years you're just going to harbor that and it's going to turn into resentment and you're not going to be able to heal. Like, you have to make this decision the best you can, and that does unfortunately mean that like sometimes like your feelings get hurt or other people's feelings get hurt or whatever. It's different. It's different for everybody. So I picked a family originally and then was like, nope, changed my mind, right? Told them. They were obviously upset, it was awful, and we decided to like cut contact just to save everybody's hearts at the time. And then at that point I was like, well, this is a sign from God, I get to raise my baby. So I was kind of like, oh, this is my sign. I was waiting for like God to tell me like, keep your baby, like this is your baby, right? And I think that I mistook that for being like my sign, when in reality,
point, how many months pregnant are you?
I think I was 5 or 6 months.
Okay, so we're about halfway through the pregnancy.
Yeah, we're headed like towards the end of summer. I had him in October, so we're like at the end of summer. And then I met my birth son's adoptive family and started asking them questions. That's when I kind of fell in love with them, and that was when I was like, well, crap, I thought I just had this sign that like this first family wasn't it. So that means like he was either supposed to go there or like I'm gonna raise him. And then I started falling in love with his family, and it started to get like confusing again. So I would argue that majority of my pregnancy, in the back of my head, I just had this hope that like
you were going to
I was gonna keep this baby. I was gonna raise him because I wasn't fully committed to my other options. And then when we all started praying about it towards the end of my pregnancy, it just, for me, I just had this overwhelming peace and comfort, and I trusted them. Like when I had conversations with his parents, his mom and dad, I believed them when they said that like they wanted me to be a part of their life, and that they loved me, and that any decision I made, they were supportive of, like, because they didn't come in my life because they wanted my baby. They were already in my life. They had a relationship with my family. They were praying for me already. They loved me already. If they got this baby, wonderful. If not, like, they were probably still going to see him every so often, or like on social media or whatever. So they were very like supportive of me, and I felt that, and I loved that. So then when we started to decide, okay, I think that's where he's supposed to be. I feel good that I can still be a really important role in his life, but that he can also have everything that I can't give him at the same time.
Yeah. Wow. And then so 3 weeks before is when you kind of...
Yeah, I remember the phone call. I called her. She was at their oldest son's. She was at their oldest son's soccer game at the park. And I was like, what are you doing? And she was like, we're just at like a soccer game. And I was like, can you talk for a second? She's like, yeah. And I was like, so baby number 3? And like I just heard the emotion, and like they already had gotten their answer that like, yes, we will take this baby if that's the decision she makes.
Wow.
And so I had made my decision. I felt confident in it. I kind of slept on it, for a while, and prayed about it. My parents felt good about it. Everyone like in my circle was like, we feel good about this. And then they did. I didn't know that at the time, but like they did. So I was kind of just saying like, hey, I got a green light. Where is your light? And that was when I could hear the tears. And then her little girl was like next to her, like, why are you crying? And it was just so cute. She's like, do you want another baby? Like, so at that point, we knew I was really close to delivering.
How many months pregnant are you at this point now?
It was like 30, I think it was like 33 weeks, and I had him at 35 or 36 weeks. Okay. When I made that phone call, they the next day had to have like all the legality stuff set up, so they had to have like the home visits and get everything set up and make sure everything was good. They had 2 weeks, so I was 2 weeks away from delivery when I called her, like 2 weeks and a couple days. And wow. I had already gone into premature labor twice, and they had stopped.
Gosh!
So like I was really like pushing it.
It was.
And again, it was because I really was looking for the out that like, no, I'm supposed to raise this baby, and I could have. Like, I came from a good family. Like, my parents weren't gonna like kick me on the curb. I wasn't a drug addict. I wasn't like sleeping around. I knew who the birth father was. Like, I was in a place to where I was in a really good place that if I did keep him and raise him, like, I think he would have still had a great life, like I said, and like I would have been able to do it. I would have been a good mom. I'm sure there would have been some trial and error. I'm sure I would have needed my parents' help. So it wasn't like we were going to be in this like crack house and like it was going to be this terrible situation. But again, I wasn't like, the biggest gamble for me was dad, and I just I fell in love with the man that's now his father, in a sense that like he was just so fun with his kids, and he's so like on the floor and playing, and like he's a wonderful husband. And I mean his mom is just, I feel like we have this awesome connection. We both just love this baby. So it's hard to say the same because it's but it's nobody else on this earth loves that baby
the way
like
that
her
you
and I.
do.
Yeah. Nobody. And so I felt that really awesome bond and connection. And then they had 2 kids too, so that was really, really awesome. I just knew. It's really hard to say like at what point was your yes. It was just a few collective weeks of just overwhelming peace, overwhelming comfort, and that trust. So we made the decision that we would have an open adoption, and that as long as I was always in a good, healthy, like, place in my life, like, that door was always open. And they also told me, like, if there's ever a time where, like, we feel we need to close it, and I respected that. Like, I liked that if I ever made dumb decisions or was, like, in a really bad place, that, like, it wasn't going to affect him. And so even though I was convinced I wasn't going to, that was their way of saying, like, as the parents, this is our decision. So they told me, as long as you're good, we're good. Like, we will never keep this baby away from you. He will always know, like, who you are and where you came from and blah, blah, blah. And I wanted, like, if I have babies in the future, I wanted them to know each other. And if I'm in town or whatever, like, and they have 150% followed through with everything that they promised me. Which is a huge, like, plus for them, but also, like, I kept myself in a place where I could have that, because I knew it could be taken away, you know, if, at any given moment. And even if I stayed in a good place and they were like, no, we don't, we changed our mind, they could have. So I think it's definitely like a two-part. Like, I was in a good place where I could be around, but they also, they could change their mind to this day. They could call me tomorrow and be like, we never want to talk to you again. And it would be the worst day ever, but I would have to be like, okay. That was part of my decision, and that's, like, what the lawyer will say to you, and, like, my counselor would say to me is, like, the second you hand them this baby, the second that you sign this paper right now, they could go to Tijuana and you could never see them again, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to look me in the eye and, like, make sure you're okay with that. And that was part of the decision. It's the hard part of the decision, but that was me acknowledging I trust them to raise this baby the way that they want to raise this baby, and, like, that was it. Like, no questions asked. I had to be okay with that. So, and again,
wow,
best case scenario, like, they're the most wonderful family. I really could talk about how wonderful they are all day long. It's not just, like, no one that doesn't know me won't know who they are. It doesn't benefit me to say that. It's just, they are wonderful, and I think I have best case scenario. I get to see my birth son more often than his siblings' birth parents get to see them. One, I'm just, like, lived closer to them, so it's been easier. But, like, our boundaries, I don't know, I can't speak for them again, but I've never felt like they've, like, crossed boundaries. They've never been, like, overwhelming to me. I think the first year I probably pushed a little bit, just because that first year is the hardest, but I always try and continue to try to, like, respect their boundaries. Like, that's their baby. I don't call him, I don't say, like, my son. I feel really strongly about calling him my birth son. Stuff like that.
That's the language that they use for their
that was what they already had established. But again, like, they're so wonderful that if at, like, any point something like that would have slipped, or, like, my birth son would have, like, maybe accidentally slipped, or, like, they're not the type that's like, oh, you know, they would have just been like, whatever, you know, like, majority, everything is good and on the same page. So, like, stuff like that happens. You never know. So, and my birth son might be the type of kid that, like, never asks any questions. Like, some kids just, like, don't care. They're good. They got their mom, their dad. They're like, oh, I was adopted, no big deal. And then other kids are, like, in therapy starting at, like, 12, because they're like, why didn't my parents want me, right? So it's I have to be, like, prepared for both. That, like, he just, like, doesn't really care. He might turn 16 and be like, I don't really care if Jayci's around, right? I have to be okay with that. I hope that's not the case. I've been in his life his whole life, but but I also have to be okay with, like, I'm mad at you, like, you should be my mom, potentially, when he gets grounded or something, you know, when he's 16 and, like, hates his parents for a month or something. So, yeah, we have just kind of both accepted that things could potentially change in the future, but, like, right now I probably see him a handful of times a year, sometimes 2, sometimes 4. You know, like, with Christmas, they live close to my parents, so if I'm home for Christmas, it's easy to be like, oh, can we stop by and bring presents? Or if, like, I would say that I've seen him around Christmas time, like, more, maybe, like, 1 or 2 years I haven't in almost 9 years. So, yeah, I mean, my experience is very open.
Wow. That's great. Well, is there anything that you would like to leave on as far as, like,
making the
this
decision.
situation.
So the specific question from one of your listeners was, how do I know whether I should raise this baby or whether I should place this baby for adoption? My biggest advice to her, anyone in her situation, or her loved ones, anyone that has family that, you know, or a daughter or son or whoever's going through this, lay out your options, decide what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, and whether you're religious or not religious. Like, for me, it was prayer, so it can be prayer for you, or it can just be like that manifestation, that like
meditation,
right? Like every morning, maybe I would take every morning and pray for 20 minutes. So every morning meditate for 20 minutes, or just be in a quiet place where you're thinking about it. Would just be lay out all your options, and then figure out what works for you. Adoption doesn't work for some people. There's personalities or situations where you're not supported, or it isn't the best option, or maybe you don't have like these great options to pick from, or like I had awesome resources available to me, so it's easy to find an awesome family. But my advice would just be to be supportive and figure out what works for you, to expect, you know, the uncertainty, to expect to change your mind. But my biggest piece of advice to birth moms specifically is to make your decision 110% before that baby's in your hands.
Oh, that's heavy.
And even if you don't, or even if you do and you still decide to change your mind, that's okay. I mean, that is, had I not, I wrote myself a letter and I made my decision, right, a few weeks before, and I told myself, like, walking in, baby still in my stomach, like, walking in, like, this is the decision I made. And the second that baby is on your chest, you're like, nope, changing my mind.
Yeah.
Anyone that's had a baby,
I didn't even think about that.
Oh,
and so and again, I had an emergency C-section, preterm labor, and with my really open adoption, I called his mom and said, you gotta get down here, like, you know, baby's here. I think my mom did. And I was laying on the bed and she was laying on the bed next to me, and we were both just like falling in love with this baby, right? We're both like meeting this baby technically for the first time.
Wow.
And in my head, I'm like, holy.
I don't think I can give this baby away.
Right? And she's sitting there going like, a few more days, like this is my baby, right?
Yeah.
But also knowing like, please don't change your mind. And I'm sitting there going like, I know I can change your mind, but I shouldn't change my mind. But am I going to change your mind? Do I want to change your mind? Right?
Yeah.
And I vividly remember she came with her camera, took a whole bunch of pictures, and then we sat in that hospital bed together for like at least an hour. And just, I had him on my chest, and then she had him on her chest, and then she left. And then I was in the hospital for 4 days. They came every single day with the 2 kids, which I asked. I wanted them to be there, and came and spent, you know, a few hours with us. And they took pictures and brought balloons, and I was watching this all happen. So part of me was like, this is so wonderful. I was watching brother and sister hold the baby for the first time, and mom and dad, like, I remember just like seeing them, and I remember thinking like, this is so wonderful. And then immediately I would like switch back to like, that's my baby, like, I don't want to do this, while also feeling like so happy for them.
Yeah, so
this is
happy.
the best day of their life, and this is about to be the worst day of mine. So had I not made that decision and felt very strongly and felt very secure in that decision, I absolutely would have changed my mind.
Yeah.
And it would have been okay. It was my right to change my mind, and there are birth moms that do, and they need to know that that's okay and not to feel guilty about it, because it is your baby. It is your baby until it's not. And so until you make the decision that it's not your baby, like, you have every right. It's kind of confusing, but.
Wow, that really is.
But you're laying it all out there, so.
I had him for 4 days in the hospital. I made that decision too. As long as I'm in the hospital, I want him to stay with me. I thought it would have been like awkward to be like sitting in the hospital, like, hey, can I go home now? And like the baby's not even there, right? In the mother baby wing. And so I made that decision. So they came and visit every day. I had him on a Thursday and then Sunday. I didn't want to be the one that handed the baby, so we made the decision. My therapist and my social worker, who I loved, she was there obviously, so I kind of had my whole moment. This would make me emotional.
Sorry. I know, I'm emotional.
I'll just end it here because I could talk about it forever. But my dad showed up that morning, and he got on the edge of my bed and he said, "You don't have to do this." Like, and then he went like one step further and was like, "Don't do this," right? So, like, we all now fell in love with this baby. And I just kept thinking, like, you made your decision, this is right. And then everyone kind of said bye to him, essentially, even though it wasn't goodbye, right, for everyone. And I just asked everybody to get out. And I put him on my chest, like, skin to skin one more time. And I sang him a song. And then I said a prayer. And then I just made him a promise. I just promised him that I was doing this for him and that he was going to have the most wonderful life. And I wanted to, like, verbalize it and say it out loud kind of for myself. But I just told him, I said, I promise to always have my life on track so that I can always be your birth mom, like, so that I can always be a part of your life and I can always love you. And then I think I just stayed in for like 20-30 minutes and just like let him fall asleep and got like that last little moment of him being mine. Because even though I knew, like, he wasn't dying, like, I was gonna be able to see him, that was the last moment that, like, he was my baby and that I was his mom. And so I just absorbed it and I just took it in. And I just remember telling myself, like, over and over, like, you can do this, this isn't about you, this isn't about you, this isn't about you, you can do this, you can do this. And then I changed his diaper one more time and I swaddled him and I gave him this, like, little cute stuffed animal and I handed him to my social worker and she walked out the door. And then I was discharged and I had a C-section, so I was, like, miserably in pain, but my dad put me in a wheelchair and, like, it still makes me want to throw up. I remember just, like, wheeling down towards the elevator feeling like I wanted to just die. Like, I just melted in that wheelchair and walked out of that hospital without my baby, and that was, like, the worst feeling. But that's just part of it. I think it's important for people to hear, like, you know, I say my adoption experience as a whole is the greatest experience ever. I love it. I don't regret my decision. I love the family. I love all of it. But that's a part of the good experience, is that, you know, that was not a fun time or a happy time, but I made that decision. I was confident in that decision, and I knew, even though I wanted to just die in that moment, I knew I was making the right decision for that baby, and that was it. I was able to leave that hospital without that baby and feel confident in that decision. You know, I mean, the next few days were just awful. Yeah, I mean, I don't pull them. They're, like, stored far back in my memory. I don't even try to pull them out of the file cabinet because they were just, So
wow.
I'll end it on that, is that you have to lay out your options for you and what works for you. And even if my experience inspires you or motivates you or whatever, like, it's my experience and it might not be yours. Lay out your options. Talk to the people that you love and trust. Get a really awesome therapist. There's really good resources available for, like, young pregnant moms. Know, like, the legal process in your specific state. Like, I knew I could change my mind in California, but I knew in Utah, where I got pregnant, I wouldn't have been able to. So know your options, and then, you know, make a decision and sit on it for a couple weeks. And if it doesn't feel right, change course and go from there. And if you are loving someone that's going through that process, just be supportive and respect the boundaries and know that, you know, there's no wrong decision. There's just different decisions. So pray about it, meditate about it, talk to people you love, know your options, get a good therapist, and then make the decision that is going to be best for that baby, number one, but also for you.
Yeah. Wow. Lots to
It's like
digest.
you're like, I just gave birth and had a baby, and you're talking about.
I know.
Yeah, don't even get me started on the first baby I had after that baby and taking that baby home. We'll save that. Or watching my husband hold that baby.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we'll save that for another.
Would you be comfortable if any potential birth moms wanted to contact you to further help you, or have you help them talk them through it?
Absolutely. I think that it's really important, again, to have resources like that. So my email, my DMs, my cell phone, I talk to birth moms all the time. I talk to potential birth moms, talk to girls that keep their babies, and also adoptive families that want to feel like they can ask some of the awkward, harder questions. Yeah. So really, I don't mind it. It's not like a service I charge or anything like that. Like, it's just, if you have a question and I see it, I'm happy to answer it. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we will put her email and Instagram handles in the descriptions, and also in the caption for the Instagram. And like she mentioned, she's has an open door policy. You can come to her at any time.
With anything, really.
With anything, on any platform.
I really don't mind. Like, I'll answer anything. I think it's really important for potential birth moms to know what they're getting into. It's not something you want to like make shiny and pretty and sell them. You want them to know the good, the bad, the ugly, so that they are confident and don't regret their decision.
That makes a lot of sense.
But yeah, so
that's good. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to share. You're our first guest on the podcast.
First guest and my first podcast. Yeah. This is a big day of first.
Big steps.
Big steps.
First tears. Have you cried on the podcast yet?
No, I probably cried after recording the podcast.
Yeah.
It's really hard to talk about like that. Some of those parts of the adoption process.
Oh my
gosh, they're good tears. Like I said, I don't want. It's not regret. It's not. There's no bad feelings. It's just.
It is what it is.
It's accepting the emotions for what they were, and it's a part of the process. And maybe we'll talk about that part a different day. But
yeah. Possibly a part 2. Oh my gosh. Wasn't that interview amazing?
Wow. So much like emotion there that, I mean, I was like, I was kind of like wrapping things up, and then didn't even like realize that we hadn't gotten to the actual day of like giving birth and, that process of kind of like handing the baby over.
I know. Oh my gosh. I was so emotional. I think because I've lived that moment of having a baby now twice, and once has been so recently. Mm-hmm. That feeling of having that brand new baby and holding it on your chest, like, it just makes me emotional to even think about it. And I think that birth moms and young moms alike, and, adoptive families, like, you really have to be so strong emotionally. And
what a process.
So, yes, it was just so impressive to hear her put that into words. We've always known this about Jayci, that this has been her experience, but we've never had like a one-on-one lengthy conversation where she went into detail. So thank you so much, Jayci.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, her Instagram and email will be in the description if you have any questions or just things that you might want to talk about or learn about the adoption process.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank you guys so much.
Okay, have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.